If you've played chess for longer than 3 days, there's a good chance you might have found yourself in this position. But what you might not know is that there's a crucial mistake here that over 4.4 million players have made. I'm going to explain to you what it is, why it's bad, and more importantly, what you should do instead. All right, guys, so first things first, this is called the Four Knights game, and you can probably figure out why they named it that. But it's really, really common and really easy to end up there because after these two pawn moves, white attacks the pawn, black defends the pawn, white brings out this knight, and then black brings out this knight. And there's a principle in chess that says you're supposed to develop your knights before your bishops. And so both players are kind of following the general principle, bringing the knights towards the center of the board, putting pressure on these central squares, right? It's exactly what you should do to start the game. But here is where everybody goes wrong. Okay, not everybody, but a lot of players will play the move bishop to c4. And this looks supernatural. Like, how could this be a bad move? This is actually a mistake. This is actually a mistake. And here is why. If black knows what they're doing, they're going to play the move knight takes e4. And you might say, wait a second, aren't you giving up the knight for the pawn? Well, you are temporarily, but the point is that black's going to play d5, forking these pieces, and regardless of what white does, black's going to win back a piece. For example, you bring the bishop back, and black will take it like this. And this is actually a really good position for black. Okay, they can simply play something like bishop to d6, get ready to castle, and black is the one who has a central pawn, and it just turns out that this is just a better position for black. Okay, and you might say, well, hold on a second, couldn't white do something else? Like maybe you take this with your bishop. That's even worse. Now the queen comes out, and yes, you can go back and attack it, but black can simply drop the queen back. And again, this is a great position for black. Both bishops are ready to go. Black can choose which side they want to castle. They have that strong center pawn. White has to be careful if you ever try to push this forward. Black's probably just going to take it. And white is the one who's cramped and not in a good position. Now, some people, going back here, think that instead of taking the knight right away, they'll sacrifice the bishop on f7 to lure the king out, and then they'll take their piece back. And they think this must be pretty good for me because I've exposed black's king. And a lot of times that's true. But in this particular case, it's not, because after d5, yes, you can play check, but the king is just going to go hide over here. And because of black's really strong center, this is why it's actually not so good for white. Look at this. Black has all this control in the center. And white really doesn't have a lot of good options here. You could try to castle, but then h6 is going to happen. You got to move your knight back here. And look at your knight. You can't really move anywhere. If black wants to, they can take this and open up your king, or they can just continue developing with bringing out the bishop, and black is totally winning, actually, in this position. So that's the reason why playing bishop c4 is a relatively, big mistake, all right? You don't want to do that to start out the game. But what should you do instead? I'm going to give you two options, and depending on what your rating is, you can choose, what you want. But I'm going to recommend, if you are rated below 1200, okay, that you play the move knight takes e5. And before you click off the video and say, Nelson's crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about, just hear me out, okay? This is called the Halloween Gambit. And we are giving up our knight for a pawn, which normally would be considered a blunder. But in this case, there's a very interesting reason why we're doing that. It's a central pawn, and in addition to the pawn, we're getting a bunch of tempo. Okay, tempo is like a turn in chess. Every move is one tempo. So if you can get a couple of moves for free or real quick while you chase your opponent's pieces around, that's called gaining tempo. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to play d4 and gain a tempo on the knight. Black has to move it now. There's really two options, knight to c6 and knight to g6. Knight to c6, in my opinion, is not as good because it allows us to play d5 and gain another tempo. And if the knight tries to go back, we play f4 and gain another tempo. And if the knight goes here, we can play e5 and gain another tempo. And you can see how we're just kicking those knights all over the place. We have this huge center. So most people, I think, in this position, instead of going to c6, will probably go to g6. Okay? Here, you're still going to play the move e5. And like I mentioned, this is called the Halloween Gambit. Now, I did a video on this in the past where I kind of talk through a lot of these lines. I'm going to link that below. And if you're curious about more information, go watch that video because I did a really good job explaining it. But the point is basically the knight has to go back. That's kind of the only square available for the knight. You can't go here because of our knight. You can't come over here because of the queen. And after you go back, we're just going to keep developing really quickly. Bishop c4, maybe queen f3, castles. And it's actually a very tricky position for black. That's why I said if you're rated under 1200, what you're going to find is that you're going to win more games playing this line than any of the other lines because your opponents are going to have no idea what's happening, and you're going to get a really nice attacking position, okay? Now, if you're in the range 1,200 to 1,600, I would say you can still get away with this, but just know it's going to be a little bit more difficult in that range. Then when you get above 1,600, that's maybe when you might not want to play this. And that being said, I've played it at the 2,200 level, and I've actually had success in blitz games. I probably wouldn't play it in a long over-the-board tournament, but for those of you, like I said, 12 to 1,600, it's up to you. And if you're below 1,200, I would say check it out. I think you're going to have a lot of success with it. Now, the video is linked below if you want to go watch, more of that. Feel free. Now, for those of you who maybe don't want to give up your knight or you want to play something a little bit more solid, the other option is the move d4. Okay, so we go into the Scotch variation of the 4 knights game. Now, when you play this, most everybody is going to take this pawn. All right, this is by far the most common move. And when they do, I want you to play the move knight to d5. This is called the Belgrade Gambit. All right, and if you notice, we're actually leaving this pawn undefended, and that's intentional. Okay, we're actually hoping that black takes this. All right, so there's a couple of ways that the game can go from here. Primarily if they take the pawn, and then the second option would be they take your knight, and then the third option would be they say, you know what, I don't really care what you're doing, I'm just going to play bishop e7 and try to castle and not worry about it. All right, so we're going to talk about all three of those in order, starting with the most obvious. What if they take the free pawn? So if they take the pawn, we're going to play the move queen to e2 and pin the knight to the king. Notice it can't move or black would be in check. And also notice that a lot of times when you do this, black would like to play queen e7 to defend and also block the pin, but they can't go there or we simply take their queen, okay? So because of that, the only way to defend this knight, if you look carefully, is the move f5, all right? A lot of times d5 would be an option, but we've blockaded that. And so after f5, you're going to play the move knight to g5. And you're attacking this pawn, this knight, and it's only defended by the pawn, and now black can no longer defend it, okay? There's a crazy move here, which I'm not even going to talk about in this video because I don't want to give it away to people who are watching, but there's a crazy move here that's good for black. It's a crazy line. Nobody's going to find it if you're below like 1,800, okay? If you're above that, maybe somebody studied it, but I think it's pretty unlikely, okay? Most people are going to play one of two things. They're either going to put you in check, or they're going to try to block off your queen here and play bishop to e7 and get ready to castle. That's pretty much the only two logical moves, right? If you try anything else, like let's just say h6, the queen comes over and it's game over. You play g6 and that's just checkmate, okay? So there's really not a lot of options apart from the crazy move that I'm not going to talk about, right? So on bishop to e7, we're going to take the knight. And then after the trade, we're going to take with the queen. And black's probably going to castle and get ready to bring their rook over and pin your king and your queen. Okay, that's probably what black is thinking. But what we're going to do is play the move bishop to d3, creating a very strong threat on h7. And now, if they go for their plan here, we don't care. We're coming in and we're going for the attack on the king. Bishop's coming in at g6, and black's in big trouble. Okay, so most likely, at this point, they're going to play g6 to block you off. And now you simply bring your bishop down and look at black's king here, guys. We've got this guy lined up here with the queen. We've got the bishop coming in. We've got our knight sitting in the center of the board. And after they go here, we're just going to simply castle. You could actually castle either way, but I think kingside is maybe a little bit better. And this is crushing. Black's in big trouble. Yes, they can move this somewhere to, like let's just say here, to create the discovered attack on your queen. But there's lots of moves that we have. In this case, actually just taking it is the best. And if they take our queen, we simply take their queen. And this is like a winning position for us. Okay, if they take our bishop, we take their rook. I mean, it's just winning for white, right? You can play around with it. You'll see. So black's pretty much in trouble, all right? If we go back, the other move that some people like to play is instead of bishop e7 is bishop to b4 check. But here we just play c3. They take, we take. They can't take us because it's defended by the knight. Remember, this guy doesn't matter because it's pinned. And so they have to move their bishop again. And a lot of people will either go back to e7 or go over to a5. This is the worst option. You simply take here, and now you've got check, which forces their king to move. And we're going hunting, queen to f5, and black's in trouble. All right. The other option, if they go back to e7, kind of transposes to the same line that we looked at before. We take it, and once they castle, you remember the move, bishop to d3. Same threat, same idea. And after g6, here comes the bishop. And again, same kind of a deal. We're going to castle. Totally crushing position for white out of the opening. This is like a dream opening, okay? So let's just kind of recap that because I know that was a lot. But when we play the Belgrade Gambit, okay, we don't care. Actually, we want them to take this pawn because queen to e2, and after f5, knight to g5, and we go into those lines that I just showed you. Very aggressive, very fun, and it's really good for white. Now, the other option that black has here is that they might just take your knight like this. Okay, and if that happens, we're going to take it back and notice the attack on the knight. They will probably move knight to e7 here or queen to e7 check. Now, queen to e7 check, we don't really care about. We're going to play bishop to e2. We're going to castle, and we're pretty happy with the position. There's not a lot that we have to worry about. Even here, I think you can just take and then castle. Your rook's coming over. Black has to figure out how to deal with that. This is an easy target. We can develop our bishop. We're very happy, okay? So most people are going to play knight to e7. And then you just take the pawn. And now your queen is being very annoying here. Black can't fianchetto because you take the rook. They can't move this, or you take the pawn. They're probably going to play d6 to try to get their bishop out. You can just simply play bishop to d3. And the bishop can't go to g4, or you'll take it. It could go to f5. Just castling is the best. If they take us, we just take it back. And this is a really awkward position for black to be in. They have to be careful with the e-file because of our rook. They also have to watch out for moves like queen to b5 check, which is a very powerful move here, just winning the pawn. It's really bad. I mean, they haven't developed their bishop. That's stuck. They can't castle. We're already castled. We're ready to start attacking, bringing in our knight. I showed you some of these threats. It's a really fun position, okay? So let's kind of go back and recap that. That was the knight takes e4, knight takes d5, and then there's one other move that some people play is bishop to e7. And those are the kind of the people who are like, I don't really want to mess with anything. I just want to kind of develop my pieces and go on with the game. If that happens, I recommend bishop to c4. It's a nice aggressive diagonal. Again, you're kind of hoping that they take you, and if they do that, we're pretty happy. We can simply castle and then get ready to bring our rook over, and this is a pretty fun, we can take this back when we want to. You're kind of just playing chess. There's not too many tricks here, but it's a pleasant position, I think, for us. And so that's basically what the plan is, just bishop c4, castle, develop, and the game goes on. But a lot of people are going to be very tempted to capture either the knight or the pawn. So you're going to see that most often. So those are the lines that I really recommend spending most of your time learning. And then just know that if they play bishop e7, that's a solid move for black. You can just play bishop c4, get ready to castle, and the game goes on. But that is how you can respond. I highly recommend this Belgrade Gambit, a very tricky move, especially if you are under 1800. You're going to have tremendous success with this. I've actually played it at the 2200 level and have had some nice games as well. So I hope that helps you guys and you understand the crucial mistake of bishop c4, and don't play that. All right, guys. See you next time. As always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.